Hi, I'm Ken Van Sickle. I'm a photographer. I take pictures, this kind of picture. More or less known as a street photographer. Things we come upon, things that aren't set up, things that are spontaneous. A while ago, I was aware that a lot of people were saying that I have a good eye, or that this photographer had a good eye, or that one had a good eye. The idea of a good eye started to inspire me. What is it exactly? Where does it come from? Does it come from a past life when you used to be Rembrandt or something? It's hard to find out those things. The other option was that perhaps something happened in your childhood, something that you were learning or doing or seeing when you were young, and that turns you out into somebody like a painter or a photographer. So that was a little easier to go look at, and I started to look back at it, and it was very interesting because I came across a whole lot of things that seemed to probably make me into someone with a good eye. The first thing I remember, actually, well, some people say it wasn't the thing I remember, but a dream I had that remembered what I had seen first. It doesn't matter. I was in a crib, lying on my back, and I saw sideways out at my eye, my mother and father were standing there. And my father was just looking down like he didn't know what I was. And my mother was looking down at me with a pleased expression. And I had a bonnet, a little bonnet like babies used to wear I was 1932. And the bonnet, the edges of the bonnet were rimmed around like that, and I was looking up at my mother and father. So that seems to have been my first image. I don't think it influenced me very much, but that was the one. My mother and father got married when they were about marriageable age, and they seemed to get along very well for a few weeks or a few months. I'm not sure how long time it was. And then I was alone with my mother. But in the beginning, my mother came home one day with a package of paper about this big, little piece of white paper. And I didn't know what it was. I was about 5 years old. And she put a piece out in the sun, and she put either an insect or a flower or something on it. And then I was looking at it, and I didn't know what was going on. And then she took it and she put it in some water, and the image, negative, but the image of the fly or the flower or whatever it was, slowly appeared in the paper. To me, it was like magic. It was just some fabulous thing, and that was the first impression I had. This is actually what it looks like. I did this in an enlarger, but it's the same idea. You put a leaf down on the paper in the enlarger, and you shine a light on it, and you get a negative image of whatever it was, leaf or whatever. The next thing that probably impressed me was my uncle was an aviator. I remember when he got his solo flight, and I watched him fly way, way up, and then he would spiral down. They used to have to go into a spin and then pull out of the spin alive. And so I watched him do that. And then between the time I was 5 and like 7, he used to take me up in his airplane. This is my uncle. The picture has a little scar on it, but that's what my uncle looked with the aviator cap on, and he took me up in this kind of airplane in those days, a biplane, 2 wings, 1 motor, and I had an appropriate costume on for a while, my little helmet as well, and he took me flying over the area that we lived in. I could see my relations waving at us, and he did that with me about, I don't know, 15 times, until he finally had a son, and then he sort of stopped doing that. I have to look down at papers because my memory is not so good anymore, so I have to look and see what's happening. There was a vacant lot about 3 blocks away from us, and a carnival came in once. We were in a little town in New Jersey, And a carnival was something like, again, another kind of a very strange and wonderful thing, with people saying, right here, come right here and see this, and the really weird sayings, and strange people, and beautiful tents, and fat people, and skinny people, and people with supposedly two heads, that kind of thing, that can catch your imagination. So that was a whole other thing that took me away and said to me, like, there are other kinds of things, there are other places than this, the ones that I was in. Then my parents, they were pretty much fairly poor. My grandfather had some land, but my parents were fairly poor. But they had enough money to start doing things like buying cameras and doing things. So my mother came and bought a camera. I think my mother or my father, but anyway, we had it. And this kind of camera, open, it's more or less, and it has all kinds of nice things about it, including large film size and very sharp pictures. And that was to me another kind of magic, where you could take an image of something, and later on you got a piece of paper with that image on it. To a kid who's 6 or 7 or 8 years old, that certainly is magic. And then my father got I have a lot of these things because I tend to keep things that I had when I was younger, and so I have a lot of objects to show you that were from that time. And the movie camera that you wind up, and then it takes like 8mm film, and we shot things like that. And one day since I was still interested in the flying, the airplanes, because my uncle was an aviator, I was taking, they let me shoot some things with the movie camera, so I was shooting an airplane was coming over, and I went up and I followed it up like this, and then as it went over, I turned around and followed it down that way. And then when we got the film back and saw it on the screen, the plane came in like this, and then it did a complete circle and went back, which it hadn't done at all. It's just because I turned the camera that it made it look like it had made a U-turn right in the sky. And that was another magic that happened to me. So I said, oh, there are all these things that can give you magic. These are the real binoculars my mother and father had at the time. And I put them up to my eyes, and things that were far away came closer. And I turned it like this, and things that were closer came far away. All magic, all things that were like that. When I was about 6 years old, my father taught me, he taught me very little, but he taught me one thing. He taught me how to shoot a rifle. Okay, so it's not a rifle. I don't have a rifle anymore. This is actually a very elegant little water pistol from the 1940s that I have kept also. I keep a lot of things around so I can show you a lot of things about that relate to what I'm talking about. In '39, my mother and father were still together, and they took me to the World's Fair. And the World's Fair was an amazing thing. It had three-dimensional movies. They were abstract. They were not like shots of people in 3 dimensions. They couldn't do that at the time. But they were like symbols, squares, triangles, and circles that would move, colored ones that would move around and look like they were coming in right to your face. That was another one. And then there was Frank Buck with his African animals and wonderful things, and people diving from boards like 50 feet high. And that was another instructional thing, and then he gave me a whole other vision at the time. What does the paper say now? I went to the movies and saw, I think the first film I saw, because my grandmother was very religious, was the story of Jesus. Of course, that's miraculous in itself. Magic. And then the second one I think I saw was Tarzan, in which he at one point walked into an enormous web of a spider's web, so I've been afraid of spiders all my life, basically. They also let me have a little set of lead soldiers. Actually, I was able to put lead in a little pot and put it on a little heater and melt it until it was liquid, and pour it into little forms to make soldiers. Like they did that with children then. I could spill it on my arm and burn myself, but I did not. So the next thing that happened to me that was another stimulus to my eyesight was I stayed in my aunt's house, who lived on the corner of a 2-story house, and I would sleep in the bedroom upstairs, And at night, when the cars came around the corner, the lights of the headlights would skim through the curtains, through the lace curtains, would skim across the ceiling and make these beautiful patterns on the ceiling. And I would watch that every night for at least until I fell asleep. My grandfather, here's the old man. My grandfather, this is a picture of him when he went to Cuba to fight in the so-called Cuban War when they supposedly attacked us. It was very much like Vietnam. There was a ship in the harbor and they made a war happen. And he went down there and the same thing happened to him that happened to me. He went down there, he got up to the front, and they stopped the war. And the same thing happened to me when I went to Korea. I got to the front and the war stopped. So we both had the same kind of good karma. My godfather actually was a photographer, but I never saw his pictures. I saw his studio once. I saw the enlarger and I saw the cameras, and so I was sort of impressed by that. Another thing happened to me, or happened with me. In my high school, I used to forge keys so I could get into all the rooms in high school. I would file regular keys, those old keys down, so I could go. And I used to go down inside and go into all the different rooms if I liked. I could have been a criminal, so I kept doing things like that. Anyway, one of the doors to the outside had a very thin slit underneath it where you could see the light coming from the outside. Not only the light, but it sort of acted like a pinhole, but not a hole. It was a slit, so I could actually see the other people I knew, the other my classmates outside running around, giving a not sharp image, but a long, slim, like a Giacometti, long, slim image of themselves running around. I even could identify some of them. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it made a big impression on me. It was simply a pinhole, but it was a pin slit, like that, and that's how it worked. And I did do some work with pinholes later on, which was fun. What else is here? Oh, I saw my grandmother being very, even though she was very religious, and maybe, I don't know if it was her book or not, but there was a book of pictures of these people who had gone to Africa. Martin and Osa Johnson were one of the first groups that went to Africa and took photographs of the people, and they had this book full of people, of women with no tops on, and with men with spears and killing lions and like that. And that was another thing that impressed me very much. In my school, in the 6th grade, I remember on the wall there were two Van Goghs. There were the night stars and the sunflowers, and that. I kept looking at those. I guess they must have had an impression on me. When I was about 14, my father was in the Navy, and he came home and he had been in Hawaii. He was in the Pacific on the Yorktown, and he brought me a Viewmaster. A Viewmaster is a little round thing with a clicker on it, and it has little 8mm pictures on each side so that they show up together as two images, so you see it in 3 dimensions. And that was very impressive, that I could click this and I could see 3-dimensional pictures of the flowers or the trees or whatever in Hawaii and the people in Hawaii. And then also, then we used to have these, this is not, I didn't have this then, but I saw one then. These are like from the early 1900s. These are, you see 3 dimensions. You see them, you have to have 2 eyes for 3 dimensions. One eye doesn't work and you can't see them there because you only have 1 eye. But they're beautiful pictures, and seeing them in 3 dimensions was really a treat, and another thing to inspire my vision. I used to make this too. This is a remake. In one little piece where you can like send a card to somebody and it's flat like that, and you open it up and there's the 2 eyes in it, and you can see the 3 dimensions in the background. I went to see a film when I was about, I don't know, 17, called The Idiot. It was in the Newark Theater, which was sort of a classics theater. I didn't know anything about that. I don't know why I went to see the film at all. But that was the first actually good film I saw, a really good film I saw, and I was very, very impressed. Also, my mother had a book of Gustave Doré etchings. Gustave Doré was a genius etcher. He did the whole Bible, you know, and I had this wonderful book that I looked at over and over. And then at some point, for some reason, my mother traded it for her boss for a book of photographs, which was very inferior. This Gustave Doré book was a great book, very fine book. The book of photographs was a cheap book, but he did that with my mother because he was her boss. But it was full of photographs, and so I started looking at photographs in a different way. I bought a 1/16 camera, something like the one I just showed you, and started shooting. And then I became an usher in the Elmore Theater in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I was an usher when I was like 16, 17 or something like that for several summers. And that was interesting to see. I probably saw Samson and Delilah about 15 times. And then I got into the movies. I got very up into the movies. And then I went to the Art Students League when I was 19 for a couple of years before I went into the Army. And I studied with some very good people and learned a lot about. I wanted to be a painter ever since my grandfather taught me oil painting when I was about 12. He started to teach me oil painting, and I started to do okay with it. He had studied oil painting and painting and art in York, Pennsylvania, in an art school for a while. And he taught me quite a bit. And then I wanted to be a painter, so I went to the Art Students League and studied with a few people, and including George Gross, who was there at the time. So I was very influenced there. And then after that, I was drafted and I went to Korea. And in Korea, I went to the PX and bought a Leica, 3C Leica, one of the old ones, but a very, very good one with a 35mm lens, which was slightly wide angle. Got me into shooting wide angle immediately. And I began to take pictures there, and I would color, and I would send them back, and then every week I would send them, and then another week I would get them back. It was like I was getting letters from somebody. I was getting some mail back, and I would look at the pictures, and that was very nice thing for me. I took probably a roll about every 2 weeks, and I was there for about 14 months, so I took about, you know, if you had 60 or 70 rolls of film. Unfortunately, I sent them back to a girlfriend, and they all disappeared. And when I was around 18 or 19, I was influenced a lot by Irving Penn, who took a whole series like this of working men. I love the lighting that he did, and I was very influenced by that. Also, I had one of my mother's friends gave me a book of Picasso's, and Picasso started to influence me, especially the drawings, the line drawings. Those are very, very interesting to me. And so when I went to the Art Students League, I was most interested in studying the drawings. And I became fairly good at line drawing, but I wasn't. I was never good at painting. I sort of missed that. These are some of my friends at the Art Students League when we were ready to go to the Art Students League ball. And then I was still painting, and this was probably just before I got drafted in Cape Ann in Massachusetts, painting on the. I still wanted to be a painter until I came back from the Army and went to Paris to study painting, and then that's where I found out that I was a photographer. I also made a book. I just made a book, and I hope that's going to come out soon, and you can all get one and look at it. Bye.